Today, we are going to address the critical idea of leadership. Leadership is best understood within the new book, True South: Leadership Lessons from Polar Extremes, written by Phil Johnston. Interestingly, True South is the first and only book to provide a patented set of 10 character traits that can correctly identify a good leader. Being able to correctly identify who will or won't make a good leader has major implications for our society. These 10 character traits of a good leader are referred to as the 10 Commandments of leadership in the book. Author Phil Johnston's expertise on leadership has provided the world with a concrete understanding of leadership. Phil's work has been awarded with a patent. The story of True South examines leadership in the most unique way because its story is a perfect petri dish for comparing leaders. The story is one of the few times in history two men were simultaneously striving for an identical and highly important goal. So, what is this story? It is the story of the historic race to claim the South Pole in 1911. The two men who strove to claim the pole are Raoul Amundsen and Robert Falcon Scott. Together, they teach us the do's and the do-nots of leadership. As explained in True South, the race to the South Pole was extremely important for national pride. Amundsen represented the newly formed country of Norway, while Scott represented Britain. Amundsen sought to bring glory to the new country, while Scott desired to preserve a national identity, the great British Empire upon which the sun never set. The South Pole, while beautiful, is also incredibly dangerous. Little other than penguins, seals, and killer whales survive. Knowing this, but desiring to be the first to claim the South Pole, both men would gather a team to make this long trek, risking their lives with every step. Only one team would succeed and even live. Raoul Amundsen was born on July 16, 1872, to a family of Viking lineage. From an early age, he focused on exploration, gaining knowledge, experience, and professional advice, all the while learning the value of teamwork, which in the book is referred to as heavy followership. Robert Falcon Scott was born on June 6, 1868, to a proud British Royal Navy family. By age 13, young Scott was in military school, quickly absorbing all the ways of the Royal Navy. He excelled in all school subjects, and then the military ranks, becoming captain. Scott was the smartest man on the ice. His leadership flaw was flaunting it. The teams were gathered, and it was time to race. Amundsen and crew were first to set out on the venture to the pole on October 19, 1911. Closely following, Scott and his men began their exploration on November 1, 1911. In this race, both men strove for the same goal. Their approaches, however, were polar opposite. Let's take a look at Scott. Scott's understanding of leadership was established within the entitlement mindset of the British upper middle class and the polished perfectionism of the rigid Navy system. In sum, leadership to Scott meant unquestioning obedience to authority. You do as you are told, and you hold your tongue. Scott did possess a number of distinctly noble qualities, however, such as personal decency, moral rectitude, and a high sense of honor. But alas, a leader he was not. On this very important expedition, his strategy proved flawed over and over again. Here are 3 examples. Scott's first mistake was losing sight of the true goal. Instead of focusing on claiming the pole, Scott allowed his attention to be diverted. He sought to also gather scientific research while on the journey. The additional goal meant more luggage, more people, and more stops. In sum, Scott's lack of focus greatly hindered the team's speed on the race. A second mistake of Scott's was deciding his team would man-haul their equipment. By making his men travel on foot while pulling several hundred pounds behind them, the British burned 7,000 calories a day, but their daily intake was only 4,400 calories. This decree of Scott's turned fatal because Scott and his team would die of starvation. A third and crucial mistake of Scott's was never grasping the importance of pace. Scott frequently forced beyond a day's march and the endurance of his teammates. Scott was focused on the idea of a race, but not the required element of good health for his team. Extended marches meant more time the men were exposed to the harsh weather of the South Pole. Now, let's take a look at a good leader. Amundsen, the Norwegian man from Viking lineage whose leadership ability far surpassed Scott's in every possible way. Here are 3 examples of Amundsen's top-notch leadership style. Amundsen's first sign as a great leader was his preparedness. He was fanatically detailed in his planning. He researched polar exploration extensively and embraced many lessons from living with the Eskimos, such as reducing sledge weight, diet control, and clothing and animal skins to keep warm. His adventurous life taught him early on to plan for the worst, but hope for the best. Second, unlike Scott, Amundsen was a master of pacing. He understood the cruelty of the South Pole's winds and was determined to keep his men minimally exposed to it. When the team was just a few miles shy of the pole and not knowing where the British were in the race, Amundsen's men urged him to continue on. They wanted to win. Amundsen, however, refused. He knew pacing kept the mind and body intact for the next day's work. He wanted to be the first to claim the pole, but he would not risk the lives of his men to do so. Third, Amundsen understood the value of a team. Rather than assembling a team based on favoritism, such as Scott did, Amundsen chose his team based on compatibility, attitude, experience, and skills. Because he chose his team with rationale and professionalism, Amundsen and his team would win the race. On December 14, 1911, Amundsen and crew arrived first at the South Pole. On top of the world, at the bottom of the world, Amundsen insisted that each man's hand grasp the flagpole as they staked their victorious claim. Amundsen knew the importance of inclusion. He knew he could not have made such a journey alone. He was selfless in his victory. Let's not forget the British, however. Their fate is not so joyful. On January 16, 1912, the British spotted a black dot in the distance. As they moved closer, everyone's hearts sank as that black dot formed into the Norwegian flag. On their long return home, each member of the British team would die as a direct result of Scott's poor planning and lack of leadership ability. Amundsen and Scott are amazingly opposites in both their strengths and weaknesses. Scott lacked strategy and contingency planning. He selected people based on favoritism and believed he was entitled, making him adopt a command and control approach to leadership. Amundsen, however, employed elegant strategy, the encouragement of heavy followership, and he valued the diversity of thoughts presented by his teammates. Last, Let's take note of how Scott and Amundsen interacted with their men, even in such a simple way as sharing a meal. First, the British. Scott sits regally at the head of the table, exemplifying his command and control approach to leadership. His men appear formal and stiff, resembling the rigid way of the Royal Navy. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there is the Norwegian team. Amundsen and his men are shoulder to shoulder, showing camaraderie. Amundsen's crew felt valued, needed, and even equal. Amundsen was a full century ahead of his time in his practice of leadership. Though the term followership was not coined until well after his death, he led with a conviction for it. A leader demonstrates followership by acknowledging when a team member has a higher ability in a given area and allows him or her to lead the team in that area. In Amundsen's case, one of his men was excellent with dogs. Therefore, Amundsen handed over control of the dogs. In brief, followership lets the little things go to accomplish the big things. Amundsen's excellence in leadership does not end with his practice of followership. In fact, that is only the beginning. Amundsen embodies all 10 leadership traits from the 10 Commandments of Leadership established within True South. These 10 traits can be remembered with the mnemonic device challenges. C. C is for consistency. A leader must have consistency in mood and strategy. H is for humility. A leader must put others before him or herself. A is for authenticity. A leader must be comfortable and confident in his or her own skin. L is for laughter. A leader must be able to laugh. Amundsen was known as a prankster. L is for listening. A leader must listen because people learn more by listening to others than by listening to themselves. Amundsen frequently sought expertise from his teammates. E is for empathy. A leader must understand the followers' needs. Often, followers need guidance. N is for nobility. Nobility is often misunderstood for doing the right thing at the right time, but in fact, that is character. A noble leader is one who seeks to be productive by helping others. It is the idea of putting others before the self. Amundsen showed nobility to his teammates, and Scott showed nobility to his country by wanting to win the race in the name of Britain. G is for great attitude. A leader must be positive and constructive when leading a team to a difficult goal. E is for ensuring inclusion. A leader must be inclusive to all teammates because exclusion is divisive and kills morale. And S. S is for self-revelation. A leader must be able to reveal a weak spot of theirs. If not, followers conclude they are not needed to accomplish the mission. Scott made this vital mistake. And now, a question for you. Why is this topic of leadership of importance to us today? The answer is simple. Without compassionate entrepreneurial leadership, as demonstrated by Amundsen, the United States will not continue as a world leader. In fact, the past 14 and going on 16 years of inept leadership has put our nation at risk. As future local and national elections approach, remind yourself to seek leaders who are servants by nature, as well as eager to learn from others. Thankfully, with the help of challenges from True South, now we all can identify a good leader. America will be great as long as her leaders are great. Whether leading a nation or leading a home, good leaders are a must.